Louie T. Welcome to this Louie T Network exclusive mini-series, Commander's Log Recap. We've broken down episodes 1 and 2. This is episode 3, and I really enjoyed this episode because they flashed back to last year's Combine as they were covering this year's Combine, looking for the next, group of guys that are going to come in here and help this football team. But they went back in time to last year's draft process at Indy when they sat down with Sam Howell, new Howell order, and Brian Robinson and some of the guys that we really think are going to be big time fixtures with this football team moving forward. And those were some impressive interviews that those guys had. And then they sat down with some of the scouts, and I thought that's always awesome for them to get shine. Those guys work so hard, and for them to get some camera time, I thought was awesome. And just listening to them and how they're wired and how they think and how they view things, I always find that fascinating as well. And then I think the biggest takeaway for me in episode 3 is something that I've been, really alluding to this offseason in particular, and that's this perception of the talent beginning to shift for a very long time. And I think after that 2016 season, there was this exodus where we lost Deshaun Jackson and we lost Pierre Garçon. And then slowly but surely, that talent that we had from, 15 and 16, I thought we just started to see it get eaten away at. You lose those two guys in 16. Kirk then joins them in 17. I think Crowder left, if not in 17 with Kirk. It was in 18. Then Jordan Reed leaves, retires or pseudo-retires, ends up coming back playing with the 49ers for a year. Then he retires. But you started to see all of that getting eaten away at. Trent Williams, ends up no longer playing for this team. Ultimately, Brandon Sheriff finds his way out as well. Morgan Moses. You started to see all of that just being kind of picked away at. Preston Smith leaves, so forth and so forth, right? So we didn't have a ton of talent to begin with, but a lot of our talent was on the offensive side, and that dissipated. And so by the time we got to 2019, we were awful. I mean, that's why we were the second worst team in football that year, only to Cincinnati, right? And so you look at where we've come from. When Ron got here in 2020, I would argue this was the worst roster in football. That would be my argument. I could be wrong, and there could have been other teams that might have been a little bit worse, but maybe got a little bit more out of their quarterback position. But for my money, in my estimation, you can't be much worse as a roster than we were heading into that 2020 season, or into that offseason rather, before they started to make moves to bring guys in that really help shape and mold this roster, bringing back Kendall Fuller, bringing in Logan Thomas, bringing in J.D. McKissick, bringing in Wes Schweitzer. I mean, you got to remember, Cornelius Lucas, all of those guys were in that 2020 offseason. I mean, they did a fantastic job of finding, these small little pieces that ended up becoming key cogs for us to help us stay afloat while we were trying to figure out what direction this roster was going to go in. And so from there, you continue to see this roster transform and build. And I think now it's culminated in a roster that I think is ready to compete at a high level in 2023. And I think this episode sort of highlighted that. And I'm going to give you a brief exercise because, off the top of the dome, and how I usually remember drafts is based off of the first round pick, right? So, because I can't remember if we had a first round pick, because I can't remember a first round pick in 2014. I don't think we had one because I can't remember one. Just go from 2015. I know Sheriff was the first round pick in 15. Dotson 16, and we can go on and on and on. We've done a really good job in the odd rounds of the draft. 1, 3, 5, 7. If you go through the last 6 or 7 drafts, all the way from 2015, because that's the last one I can remember in terms of a first round pick. Because 2014, we didn't have a first round pick. If I'm not mistaken, was that the year they took Trent Murphy in the second round? He might have been our first pick that year, now that I'm thinking about it. I'm not sure. I'm not going to lie to you. Maybe we had a first round pick and I can't remember. But if you start at 2015, because I can remember that draft. That was the Sheriff draft. Just go through those drafts, 15 and 16 and 17. Anybody that's been a key contributor on this football team, guys that have, made plays for us that we can remember, that we have fond memories of. Go through those drafts, 15 and 16 and 17 and 18 and 19 and 20 and 21 and 22. Look at all of those rounds and tell me that we got production out of guys in the second, the fourth, and the sixth. You won't find very many. Most of the guys that we've gotten production out of that ended up being core players for us came out of rounds 1, 3, 5, or 7. Go ahead, look at it. I guarantee you, because I'm playing it in my mind. I think Preston Smith was a second round pick. I think. He could have been a third. I think he was a second round pick, though, because I think he was in that same draft with Matt Jones. Who? Matt Jones! And I know he was a third round pick for sure. We could have had 2 third round picks that year. But I think Preston Smith was a second round pick. And Chase Rouillet, I always get it mixed up. He could have been a 5th. I think he was a 6th round pick, though, out of Wyoming. Chase Rouillet was. But I always get it mixed up because one time he's a 5th rounder for me. The next time he's a 6th rounder. I think he's a 6th round pick, though. Those are the 2 guys that I can think of in my head. I could be leaving somebody out. Was Tim Settle the 6th round pick? I think he was a 5th. Again, once you get down into the third day of the draft, you get down to those 5th, 6th, 7th round, it gets a little murky for me. But I believe Tim Settle was a 5th round pick. But look at those drafts. There aren't many guys that have contributed at a high level for us in the 2nd, the 4th, the 6th. There's a lot of 1st, 3rd, 5th, and 7th round guys that have given us plenty of quality snaps. Plenty of quality snaps. So we need to do a better job in the 2nd round, in the 4th round, in the 6th round, right? Like Kendall Fuller is a 3rd round pick. I could go on and on and on. Morgan Moses was a 3rd round pick. Like, we're still waiting on Sam Cosmi out of the 2nd round, right? We're still waiting on Percy Butler. He's a 4th rounder. I think this year could be the year for Percy Butler. I've already told you that. But, wasn't Sadiq Charles a 4th round pick? He could have been a 3rd round pick. He could have been a 3rd rounder. I really feel like he was a 4th round pick, though. Again, gets a little murky for me. Anyway, it was refreshing to see them sitting down with Sam Howell, going through that interview process. And I thought the thing that stood out for me with Sam in that interview is when they asked him, what's your best attribute? What's your best quality? And he turns to the staff and he says, my best quality is rallying the troops, rallying the guys. I came to North Carolina and we were a 3-win team. We sucked pretty much. And I was the beginning of turning around that program. Now you see they got Drake May and they're winning 9, 10 games every year. I started that. And I think that's huge. When you go to a program and it's falling on hard times and you're able to go there and pick it up and leave it in a better... You remember what Ron said? My biggest goal is to leave a situation in a better place than where I found it. To me, that should be every single human being's biggest goal outside of being a good dad, a good son, if we're talking about leaving a footprint, leaving a legacy, leave the earth a better place than where you found it. Do your part. And Sam is like, I left Chapel Hill in a much better spot than the way I found it. And so I really, really value that. That's huge. Getting guys to follow you, getting guys to believe. And you're going to hear from one of Sam's teammates a little bit later on in this show. And you're going to hear another quote that I thought was my favorite quote of this series to this point from Matthew Berry. So stay tuned for that at the very end of the show. But I believe in Sam for a number of different reasons. Not just because of what he did at Chapel Hill, not because of what he did in the preseason, not because of what he did in Week 18 alone. Those things are part of why I feel the way that I feel about Sam. But it's listening to others who have played with him, who coached him, who've been around him, who all say the same thing. Like, this isn't a coincidence. If one guy says it or, a couple people say it, you go, oh, okay. But then there's somebody else saying the direct opposite. Then you go, okay, something's amiss here. Everyone's saying the same thing about Sam Howell. That's not a coincidence. I don't think they got this wrong. Okay. Then they were sitting down with Brian Robinson. And, just getting him to explain, certain things and kind of getting a feel for him. And it just goes to show you, because you don't have a lot of time at these meetings in the combine. It's like maybe 15 minutes or so, 30 minutes max. It's not a lot of time that you have with these prospects because there's so many there. And if you're getting, and I don't know if you get a chance to talk to every single one, or, do you have to put together a list of guys that you want to speak to and it's a specific number? I don't know how that works. I'd actually be interested to know how that works, because you're talking about over 300 prospects, I think, show up at the combine. If it's not 300, it's like 250 something prospects. It's something along those lines. It's a lot of guys. So I don't know if they're able to talk to every single one or not, but at the end of the day, this episode to me, listening to the scouts, listening to some of those little interviews that they had with Sam and Brian Robinson in particular, and seeing how they went about the business of I really truly love Marty Herney. There's a clip of him sitting up in the booth with Ron Rivera, and you got to see Ron walking around the combine, getting up with a couple of old chums. I think he saw Doug Peterson. Obviously, he saw Andy Reid. He loves Andy Reid. That's his guy. Andy gave him his first shot in the NFL as a coach. And so, he was talking to Brandon Beane. They shared a laugh together. And Beane and company were sitting in the booth right next to them. And he was making jokes about, Herney's on the phone. And he's like making a deal for him. Like, hey, I'll give you a 3rd-round pick. And Ron's like, Herney, Beane's over there making a deal for you. But Herney, I just love Herney because he's a grinder, man. He's on the ground, right? Boots on the ground. That's Marty Herney. He's traveling to these pro days. He's out here in these streets checking on these prospects. And, I trust him more than I trust Martin Mayhew. I'll just say that. Anyway, he's like, hey, this next guy, I think he's a great fit for us. He's supposed to run in the 4.3s. And then he runs. Obviously, they redacted his name. We couldn't hear who they were talking about. I was thinking maybe they were talking about Emmanuel Forbes. Couldn't have been, because he did run in the 4.3s. And this guy that they said, would be a great fit for us. And he's like, I got a, 4th-round grade on him. He ends up running, probably in the 4.4s. And Herney says, yeah, that's a bit slow. And Ron said, and I think Ron said, oh, okay, that was a bit slow. And Herney says, yeah, that's good for us. That, because I've heard that before. I didn't know that people actually thought that way. I've heard Daniel Jeremiah say that before when he would be, when he was with the Eagles and the Ravens, they'd be happy when a guy underachieved at, the combine or the pro day, because they knew what these guys were capable of. They're not dissuaded by a guy running a 4.46 and they know he's capable of running a 4.38. They don't care about that. That's not going to change their mind. If they know he's capable of running a 4.44 and he goes out and runs a 4.52, that's going to scare some teams away. Oh, he's a corner and he can't run a sub 4.5. Yeah, we can't do anything with that. And they're like, well, we know he's plenty fast. We'll take him, and we may be able to get him around later because you don't think he's fast enough, So I just thought that was fascinating. But at the end of the day, this episode was about the perception of this shift in talent here in Washington. I think that it's changing. And guys like Sam Howell and Brian Robinson are going to continue to usher that change in to Washington. Like, two more guys in odd, rounds. Sam Howell, a 5th rounder, and Brian Robinson, a 3rd rounder, continuing to come in here. Benjamin St. Juste is a 3rd rounder, right? All these guys that we are looking at as dogs. 1st, 3rd, 5th, 7th. James Smith-Williams, 7th round pick, right? Khaleke Hudson, 5th round pick, right? Like, all of these guys that we feel like are core guys. Terry McLaurin, 3rd round pick. Montez Sweat, 1st round pick. Jonathan Allen, 1st round pick. Deron Payne, 1st round pick, right? 1st, 3rd, 5th, 7th. We got to start hitting on some of these 2nd, 4th, and 6th round picks. When we strike out, it's usually in those even numbered rounds. It's time for that to change. And I'm hoping that changes this year. Chris Rodriguez is the 6th round pick. Let's see if he can't give us something, right? You got Quan Martin in the 2nd round this year. We really need Quan Martin to step up. If not him, Percy Butler. One of y'all even round dudes got to step up. Sam Cosme, I'm looking at you, bro. I need you to step up. It's a 2nd round pick. Like, we need some of these even round dudes to give us something. Because right now, there are a lot more of these Antonio Gandy Goldens in the 4th round than there are, Chase Roulier and some of these guys in the 5th. I think he was a 5th, if not a 6th. But I think he was a 5th rounder. Or Tim Settle is a 5th round pick. Cole Holcomb is a 5th round pick. Like, it's a lot more of those dudes producing than there are in the 2nd and the 4th for us. So I'm hoping that we continue to see. The thing I can say is that we've drafted a lot better. A lot of these guys are turning out to be contributors for us that we've drafted, whether it's in the 1st, 3rd, 5th, or 7th. Haven't had as much success in the 2nd, 4th, and 6th, but at some point that's going to change, you would like to think. But anyway, episode 3 was really fun. It was a nice look behind the scenes, specifically at the Combine, at what things transpire there. They talked to Schefter and they talked to Ian Rappaport, and you saw Ron, go and have a little sit down with ESPN on their NFL Live set and do a segment with them. And he talked about Sam on that particular segment. And then he comes off the set and Ian Rappaport's out there and in the corridor, and he speaks with him and he's like, what are you hearing? And Ian's telling them about, the quarterbacks and in the offseason, like, Derek Carr's going to sign here shortly. And he did. He was the first domino to drop there. And he's like, everybody's waiting on Rodgers. We don't really know what's going to happen with that situation. And, someone told me, a wise man told me how that whole dynamic works with those insiders. They give you a little information, and in turn, you give them a little something. Like, they tell you what they're hearing, and then you tell them a little something about your situation, so that they can give that information to other teams. So you got to be careful if you're going to play that game of what you tell Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter, because they're in the information game. And when you're in the information game, I'm going to use your information to gain more information. That's how it works. So anyway, I digress. Really fun episode that was. The talent on this team is shifting. We're no longer a bottom third in the league talent-wise type of organization. Right now, I think we're in that 2nd tier of teams in terms of talent, but I think we're at the top portion, the upper portion of that second tier, and we're heading towards tier 1. Not there yet, but I think we're damn close. And with that kind of talent, you can compete in this league. I just think about a team like the Tennessee Titans, and again, I think a lot of what they're able to do is based off of their coach. I love Mike Vrabel. You know, he's not the cleanest coach, right? He doesn't make all the right decisions. Titans fans complain about him sometimes being too conservative, but Mike Vrabel has an identity. He has a personality. He understands who he is. He understands who his team is, and he coaches to their strengths and tries to minimize their weaknesses. They're not the most talented team. They haven't been the most talented team in the league, but they've gotten the most out of their talent, and they've been a mid-tier talent team for quite some time, and that's been good enough for them to make the playoffs, win 12, 13 games, be the number 1 seed a couple of years ago, make it to the AFC Championship game 3 years ago or so, 4 years maybe now. So you can do some damage with the kind of roster that we have. But you got to get the play out of the quarterback position, and you got to be coached well. We'll see if those two things happen in this upcoming season. But the talent is now here. That's why I think we're ready to win in 2023. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T. I thank you guys for joining me here on this Commander's Log Episode 3 recap. Looking forward to doing it again with Episode 4. Until then, you guys, take care. Have a good one.
But Antoine, your last 3 seasons you spent with Commanders quarterback Sam Howell at North Carolina. He potentially could be the starter in Washington, and they've gone through multiple quarterbacks the last few years. Tell us why you think Sam can be the guy and what makes him so special.
Yeah, I think I'll start off with what makes him special. So his arm talent and his ability to actually run the ball too. And I mean, aside from that, he's a smart player. He's smart with his decisions and just being able to lead a team. So he came in young at North Carolina and changed the program around. So he's done it here, and I believe he can do it at the next level too. I think that's what he will do.
And I will tell you that I talked to one scout that I really trust. He just turned to me and says, I got to tell you this. Sam Howell gets on the field, he ain't coming off.